When it comes to doing demand analysis on your potential HMO locations, nothing quite beats SpareRoom in terms of showing you exactly where the market is at the moment. I love it so much that I've got around half a dozen different ways of assessing demand for your area. And that's exactly what I'm going to run through now. It's why I'm sitting down, because a lot of this is going to be based on my laptop. But there are some really good tips in here. It's one of my favorite modules, and I hope that you get a lot of value from it. Now, some of these analysis techniques you can use to get an idea of the market immediately. Other ones take a bit more time to gather some real data behind it. And then other ones work with the heat map that you've produced as well. So there's a real mix here, and hopefully you will find something that suits your way of thinking. In order to get started, all you really need is a computer with internet access, or even your mobile phone, although with some of the data that we're going to be collecting that might be a little bit tricky, and an Excel spreadsheet or something similar, Google Docs, whatever you like to use. First thing I'm going to do though is to pull up SpareRoom on my laptop and type in the area that I'm interested in. Now, as with most things property related, I like to use postcode areas rather than town names or cities as my search criteria. I just find it helps me focus in on more specific areas rather than trying to say the whole of Stockport, for example. So all I've done here is type SK1 into the search area on the main homepage of SpareRoom, and what it brings up immediately are the number of rooms for rent, so the rooms available in that postcode area. And you can see here showing results 1 to 5 of 5 results. So there are 5 listings on SpareRoom for the SK1 part of Stockport. Now, what I want to do with that is to grab a spreadsheet and very simply 3 columns. Now, this is part of my really down and dirty, quick way of doing some kind of high level deal analysis. So there's only 3 columns here. Some of the later steps do get a lot more complicated if you've got the time and inclination to get into that. But for the purposes of getting started really quickly, what we can do is put the fact that there are 5 rooms available in there. And then if we go back to SpareRoom, change it to rooms wanted and search again. There are 106 people looking for rooms in SK1. Now, the caveat is that is only if you believe what SpareRoom has to say, and I will show you some of the flaws with each of these processes as well as the good points of each one. As I said at the start, this one is really kind of quick and dirty. It is not the best analysis to do, but can give you some idea if you're really in a hurry to get your analysis done. But a lot of the future steps build upon this, so it's good to get an idea of what I'm doing straight away. Let's go back and repeat it for SK2, SK3. These are all the kind of major Stockport postcode areas. So we'll go back to SpareRoom, type in SK2, and we want to go back to rooms for rent. And you can see that there are 12. So we'll go back to our spreadsheet, put in 12. And rather than you watch me do this for each one, I will just jump ahead to the stage where I have filled all of this in. I've finished collecting the data now for each of these distinct postcode areas, and you can see that if you looked at one postcode in isolation, things might look quite positive. You've got 5 rooms available and 106 rooms wanted, which is a great ratio. But this is where some of the major flaws of this basic SpareRoom analysis come into play. Now, if you look across the rooms available, you have got quite a mix from 5 rooms in the town centre available up to 25 rooms in one of the outskirt postcodes available, a total of 90 rooms across all of Stockport. If we look in this rooms wanted column though, there's a bit of a pattern. The first 7 postcode areas all have exactly the same number of people looking for a room, and as I said, this is one of the major flaws of SpareRoom. They, in their infinite wisdom, have made these classifications of areas based on clusters of postcode groups. And I'll show you in a couple of minutes exactly how we can get around that. But like I say, if you looked at this one in isolation, say you only wanted to have an HMO in SK1, you went onto SpareRoom, you typed in your search for rooms available and then rooms wanted, things might look quite positive, but you need to keep in mind that this 106 number is more often than not going to encompass a whole host of different areas. So these 106 people are also looking for houses in all of these 7 postcode areas. So you cannot simply say 106 people want to live in SK1. It's false, and you would have some potentially disastrous results if you relied on that alone. One of the other flaws with SpareRoom, and it's not so much a flaw, it's just human nature, I suppose. If we go back across to SpareRoom, and all I'm on here is the rooms wanted for SK1, and if we start clicking into some of these people, what you will see is that under this heading, looking in, this tenant in particular is looking in Altrincham, Cheadle, Knutsford, Manchester Airport, Manchester South, Sale, Stockport and Wilmslow. So SK1 fits into Stockport, but he's also looking in all of these areas. If we just look at someone else as an example, let's go and see where Joyce is looking to live. Ashton, Hyde, Manchester Central, Manchester South and Stockport. So all of these 106 people that are showing up as wanting to live in SK1 could potentially want to live in much wider areas across all of Greater Manchester, or even further afield. You can search up to the whole of the UK, I believe, on SpareRoom. So you can't really assume that these 106 people would necessarily be interested in your room in one specific area. They may have put Stockport in, but only want to live near the hospital, for example. So you need to take it for everything that you see here with a pinch of salt. Now, the final flaw, I suppose, with this that I'm going to touch on is the fact that of these 106 people, they are the only ones that have chosen to register on SpareRoom and show the areas that they're interested in. There will be plenty of other people who are sitting in the background looking on SpareRoom and haven't registered for an account yet. They're waiting for the right property to come up. They may never register for an account. They may just use the email and telephone functionality without actually registering on the system. So this number will actually be towards the low end of the people that are looking in your area. So if you use it as a basis but don't rely entirely on it, it can give you some idea of the number of rooms available versus the number of rooms wanted. But with those flaws in mind, you're obviously going to have to be aware that it's definitely not a perfect science. So what I want to do now is to look at a more detailed approach and show you exactly how we can get into some more accurate data, particularly if we start to extrapolate that across a period of time. What I want to do for this improved SpareRoom analysis is try to overcome some of the flaws that came up in the first one. And the major one for me is the fact that these 106 people that we've identified looking for rooms in SK1 are also looking in SK2, SK3, SK4, and it gives you a really imbalanced ratio. So I want to try and figure out exactly what areas SpareRoom are grouping together, and by doing that I should be able to get a much better average ratio for the whole area. Not specific to my own individual postcode, but if I look at it for all of Stockport, it'll give me a much better idea of who exactly is looking to live there. So there's a couple of ways that I can improve upon this, and if I come back across to my laptop now, what I want to do is, first of all, like I say, start to figure out exactly how SpareRoom groups these together. And the first thing you're going to need to do is to get a list of all of the postcodes in your specific area. Now, I find the best place to do this is Wikipedia. They tend to have good lists of postcodes for your area. So if I just type in here, Stockport postcodes, let's see what comes up. SK postcode area, that's exactly what I want. So also known as Stockport postcode area, covering the towns of Alderley, Edge, Buxton, Cheadle. So it tells you exactly where it covers. And if we come down here, we've got a great list, SK1 all the way through to SK23. It tells you the post town, it tells you the areas that it covers, and also very conveniently tells you the local authority areas. Now, this is great. You'll be able to do this for anywhere. Just to prove it, let's see if we can do Bristol postcode areas, BS postcode areas, and in exactly the same format from BS 0 non-geographic, that might be a kind of PO box or something, maybe the local authority, the local council buildings, right the way down to BS 99, again non-geographic, so you probably won't find many people searching in these areas, but you've got a lot in between, and again it shows you the post town, what exactly that covers, and the local authority area. Now, I have done this analysis for all of Greater Manchester. If I come into this tab, postcode area, and I'll make sure that this Excel template is shared underneath the video, you can see that I've done for all 100 or so plus of the Greater Manchester postcode areas. I've got the postcode district, which is the first 3 letters, numbers of the postcode. I've got the post town coverage, so just exactly the same format as Wikipedia, the local authority area. And then what I have done for each of these 100 or so is taken the number of rooms available for each of them and the number of rooms wanted. Now, there are 2 ways that you can identify how SpareRoom groups these together, and I would suggest creating a template like this for all of the areas that you're interested in. Do as wide as you can, because there are a couple of advantages to doing beyond the area that you think you're maybe initially interested in. So in order to determine exactly where SpareRoom groups it together, you can first of all do that on SpareRoom. So if you're just looking at a small number of postcodes, you could come back to a search and you could just work through them. So what you want is rooms wanted, SK1, 103 results, and this has changed. It went from 106 when we first started this video up to 107, now it's down to 103, but we'll just stick with 106 for the time being. So we see how many there are for SK1, then you go into SK2, same number, SK3, and you could just work through this, trial and error, the postcode areas around where you're looking. The problem with this approach though is that whilst you might find 6 or 7 that do match, you're not necessarily getting the ones that you've not checked. So you might find that next to a Stockport postcode there is a South Manchester postcode that SpareRoom have grouped together. If you're not searching for those South Manchester postcodes, then you're not going to realise that the people looking in your area are also looking there. So what I find is a much better way to do it is if I come back, and this is one of the reasons I like to do a really wide search. So I've got all of Greater Manchester here. I go through rooms wanted for each postcode area, and then I can start to filter based on where the numbers are the same. So let's say, for example, I type in 106 here and go OK. If I clear them all first, that would help. 106. And it's brought back all of the entries that have got 106 people looking for a room. And there you go, SK1 through to SK7. Fantastic. So that's exactly what I'm looking for. And it removes the need to use the kind of trial and error approach. If there was an M something postcode, Manchester postcode in here, it would have brought that up with the same number of rooms wanted. So we can clear that. The other thing you could do, let's say we come down, let's say we want everyone that's got 33 rooms. So there's 3 entries that have got 33 rooms wanted, and what do you know, they're all next to each other in Rochdale, OL11, OL12, OL16. So you can be fairly sure that that is one group within SpareRoom. Now, that's obviously only the first part of it. What you then need to do is group these areas together, because as it stands, if we look at these Rochdale postcodes, the ratio is still comparing the rooms available for that one specific area with the rooms wanted for 3 different areas. So your ratios don't really mean anything at this point in time. If we come across to the next tab, and this is the next iteration of the process, I suppose, I've got a couple of new columns here. So postcode district is just what I've called it. This is basically the grouping that SpareRoom has given to those postcodes. So you can see I've got OL11, OL12, OL16. They're the ones that we looked at with 33. And I've got the total number of rooms available across all 3 of those postcode areas. So I've got the rooms available for those 3 postcodes versus the rooms wanted for those 3 postcodes. So this ratio is much better than trying to compare each individual postcode area like we were doing in this previous tab. You can see 21, 12, 15 are obviously hugely different from 48, but I find that this ratio is much more specific. So the first thing you need to do is to figure out exactly how SpareRoom groups their postcodes. Then you need to go through this exercise of collecting the rooms available and the rooms wanted, combine the rooms available for all of the postcode areas that you identify, and then calculate your ratio. Now, this ratio can be calculated in one of 2 ways. You can do it either rooms available divided by rooms wanted, in which case you're looking for a low percentage is great. So for example, if you've got 25 rooms available and 100 rooms wanted, that would give you a ratio of 25%. If you had 50 rooms available and 100 rooms wanted, that would give you a ratio of 50%. So obviously 25% is much better. There are 4 people looking for every 1 room versus 2 people looking for every 1 room. You could flip it on its head and do rooms wanted divided by rooms available, whichever way you prefer to do it, in which case obviously a higher ratio would be better for you. But this ratio just gives you a quick idea. Now, I mentioned that there are a couple of reasons why doing a wide search beyond just the area that you're interested in is valuable. One of them, obviously, we've already spoken about, is that you might pick up some straggler postcodes that actually SpareRoom groups in with the area that you're looking for. The other reason is that you can now start to use this data that you've collected to show potential goldmine areas for yourself, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. So if we come back to the spreadsheet and we look at this ratio tab, what we can do, as I mentioned, a low ratio is great for us the way that we've calculated this. If we sort them from lowest to highest, it will show you areas where there are a lot of people looking for rooms and very few rooms available. Some of these we could rule out straight away. So a lot of the Manchester city centre postcodes are Article 4 areas, so we're probably not going to bother with them. Some of them are very expensive, but you get these little places like Littleborough. There's 11 rooms wanted and 0 rooms available. Now obviously 11 rooms wanted isn't a huge proportion, but if you're not looking to grow a massive portfolio, maybe you live in Littleborough, for whatever reason there are 11 people that want to live there. If you're just looking to set up one HMO and there's no competition, it might be worth looking at that somewhere that you hadn't even considered. By looking at this ratio from smallest to largest, you start to get an idea of some potentially untapped markets in your area as well, which is why it's worth, when you're doing this data collection, spread the net a little bit wider than you might think, and you might identify some hidden gems, which is a great secondary advantage to doing this SpareRoom analysis process. So hopefully by now you will be starting to see the benefit of going into a bit more detail when it comes to doing your SpareRoom analysis than just looking at one particular area. But what if we take it a step further and start to use it to see what trends are like in our particular areas? Now I've got another tab here, rather inconspicuously called Sheet 4, and if I click onto that, what you will see is tracking for our areas across different months. Now you could do this on a daily basis. If you're trying to gather data over the course of a couple of weeks, you could do it on a weekly basis or even a monthly basis like I've done here. And by collecting the same data, rooms available, rooms wanted, and the ratio over a period of months, you can start to use this data in a really powerful way. It will show you seasonal trends. For example, what times of year, what months of year are extremely popular and what months are less popular for renting rooms. Now this can help you with your pricing, and it can also help you try to figure out if you're working on a new project, when ideally it should be coming onto the market. It might be worth, if a project is due to finish in December, waiting until January to get an uplift in rental income, rather than tying tenants in for 6 months on a lower rent that you need to reduce it to before Christmas in order to get your rooms filled. Now, that is just one example. Obviously, you might find that December is really busy in your area, but we tend to find that there are some seasonal trends, and by tracking the data on a weekly or a monthly basis like this, it can give us some really strong insights into what is happening and when the best time to price your rooms is. Now, the other thing obviously is that it can show you where areas are growing in demand and where demand is decreasing in other areas, and that can tie back into your initial area analysis to help you decide on the best location for your HMOs, to figure out where there's an increase in people looking, where there's a decrease in people looking, where there's an influx of rooms coming onto the market available, and where there's a decrease in the number of rooms available. All of these things, if you track, can give you some really valuable and powerful insights into the best areas to focus on for your HMO investing. So you can do the very high level analysis on SpareRoom, just looking in your area at the number of rooms available and the number of rooms wanted. There are a few major flaws with this that mean the data isn't too accurate, but it can give you some insight. You can take it a step further and look at the areas that SpareRoom groups together, and that should give you a much more accurate ratio of exactly who is looking for rooms and how many rooms are available in your area. And then if you're really serious about this, if you want to go into the real depth of detail and you're a real kind of data geek, a bit like myself, then you can obviously start to track it over periods of time. And the longer you track this data, the more valuable it is going to become. So they're the major ways that we use SpareRoom, but there are a couple of others that I want to talk about now as well. So I'm going to come back to my laptop and show you a few other little tips and tricks that we can use on SpareRoom to continue to track data in different ways. One thing I really like doing is tying up the heat map process that we did earlier with the analysis that we can do on SpareRoom. And you might have seen in the Facebook group this post by Rory Cullen, who completed the heat map process, and this is his analysis for Milton Keynes. And what you can start to do is you can layer on top of this the properties that are available in your area. So let's say, for example, we want to focus in on this part, like in the northwest of Milton Keynes. So I've just zoomed in on that area, and the postcodes here are MK8, MK9 and MK13 from memory. So all you would do is you would go to SpareRoom, let's do MK9 for example, and you want rooms for rent and you want to show results on a map. And what you get within Google Maps is pinpoints on exactly where the houses are. Now this can be really helpful if you're trying to understand exactly where you should buy a house, if you're trying to avoid the competition or you want to see what areas they particularly are targeting. It can be really useful. So all I'm going to do is zoom out to a scale where it roughly resembles what we had in Photoshop. And for me, being preferring technology, I'm going to take a screenshot of this. If you want to do it the old-fashioned way, again, you could print out your heat map and just mark on the houses with a little red X or whatever you want on top of the map. But I'll take a screenshot of this, go back into Photoshop, and I've got this screenshot open here. So I'm just going to copy that and paste it on top of my map. And what I want is to try and get the scale to match this. Now, for me, I'm just going to make this a little bit opaque so you can see through it a little bit. I'm going to try, you've got Campbell Park and Campbell Park, so we'll try to get them roughly the same size. And then I'm just going to move it into position. So maybe still a little bit too big. You can see the park just behind it. There you go. Something like that. And I'll do this for MK8 and MK13, and then let's see what we are left with. What you're hopefully left with is this map that is a combination of your heat map area. You can see on Rory's here, obviously the highlighted areas in yellow, and the SpareRoom screenshots of the properties over the top of that. And you can just see the yellow highlights underneath it, so you still get the information that you need. Now, this is obviously useful to show you where there are potential gaps in the area. So this is Milton Keynes Central train station, and it doesn't look like there are any houses in the immediate vicinity of that. So if you could pick something up close to there, I'm sure for commuters that would be extremely handy. And it's really just another way of looking at what is available in your area. Where are popular areas? If you're looking at a property on a specific street, are there lots of other houses nearby? How do the houses that you're looking at tie up with what's available in the area, how that coincides with what you've found on your heat map? And you could in theory do this for the whole of Milton Keynes. The only problem you might face on SpareRoom is if we come back here, you can see I've done a search for all of Milton Keynes. The map only shows up to 100 properties. There's 186 rooms available in Milton Keynes at the moment, so they're not all going to be on this map, which is why, again, doing it by postcode, it may take a little bit longer, but you'll make sure that all of the properties you get are hit. And it's really simple as that. Another little trick, you may want to go down this route. Like I say, you can do it just as simply with a red pen or a highlighter on top of the heat map. But just another way of showing you what is currently available and how that ties into the areas that you've identified as potential hotspots. And hopefully it might help you focus in on a couple of hidden gems. Everything that we have looked at so far has focused on the location of properties available and the location of rooms wanted. And that makes sense. This module is all about picking your ideal location. But one other thing that you can do before we get too much into the detail of the price of rooms and whether they've got en suites and communal spaces and all that sort of stuff, which we will look at in a later module, one other thing you might want to use SpareRoom for at this stage is to see just how popular houses are in specific locations. So we've done a lot on identifying where the houses are and where the demand is, but how do we know if the rooms that are being advertised are actually getting taken, if the rooms are being filled? You can do that in quite an easy way, and again, it takes time, it takes a little bit of effort, but it is very simple to do. Now, I've taken a postcode in Bristol, BR5. Let's assume that that's one of the areas that you are looking at. There are only 23 results here, so I see no reason why you couldn't do this for every property that is available. All I would do is go into each advert and I would take the unique URL to that advert, copy it, put it into a spreadsheet, and basically come back on a daily basis and see how long that advert remains available for it. Now, obviously, the longer you do this, the better an idea you will get, because the day that you first see the advert, you can put that date in one column. Initially, when you're doing this, some of these rooms will have been on for a couple of weeks already, so it's not overly accurate, but the longer you do this for, you'll start to notice properties the very day that they come on the market. So you can start to have that column as a real clear indicator of when they came on the market, and you can track that property again until it goes off the market, and that will give you a real idea of how long things are staying active for. And it will also show you can start to filter by how quickly rooms are rented, so you can see what is renting quickest. Is it price that's most important? Is it the fact that there's an ensuite room available, or the fact there's communal living space? You can really get into the details of each advert and see, based on how long it's taking, what do you think are the factors that are contributing most to that property's success or failure. And this just gives you a quick idea of what that spreadsheet might look like, and I will make sure that there is a template for this in the Excel file attached underneath the video. So what I would have here is the URL for SpareRoom, so every day you can just come and click on that and see exactly where your property is up to, rather than having to go through the list every day. You can put the date that it was first added, or at least the date that you first saw it, the date that it was removed. If it's not removed, obviously you just leave that blank, how long it was on the market for. And that's really handy later on when you want to come and filter this, or if you sort it by shortest duration, you'll see what's made the rooms go quickest, whether that's great features, good location, or just the fact that it's been marketed well. And then any notes that you think are relevant to the specific reason that that property stayed on the market for a short or a long period of time. So for example, it might have bad pictures, could have an ensuite bathroom, be interesting to track that. You could filter this by all the ensuites and see if they've got a shorter average than the ones without en-suites, for example. So everything that you can do to start gathering data is going to be extremely helpful in the long run, particularly if you are planning on taking this seriously and being in the HMO market for the foreseeable future. The final thing that you can look at doing when it comes to demand analysis on SpareRoom is posting a dummy or a fake advert. Now, the reason I've left this till last is not because it's the least valuable. Certainly it has helped us a huge amount in the past using this process, but there are some questions around the ethics and even the legality of posting fake adverts. There are people who would have you believe that it is against Advertising Standards Authority regulations, and certainly, when it comes to wasting the time of prospective tenants who are perhaps desperate to find somewhere to live, there is a little bit of a grey area around whether or not this practice should really be recommended. So entirely up to you if you want to do this. What it involves is simply putting an advert for a property with similar images in a similar area, a similar price point to what you're looking to deliver on SpareRoom as an active advert, and really just testing what sort of response, what sort of demand you see to it. So it's very simple to do. Obviously, the beauty of SpareRoom is that it is free. And the first point of contact on SpareRoom is 9 times out of 10 via their own messaging system. In fact, I think they've actually taken the phone number off the majority of adverts. So the messaging system is by far and away the major platform. So it means from your own point of view, it'll be relatively easy. You can either let the prospective tenants know that the room's been taken, or if you really don't want to spend the time on it, you could just ignore them, and they will hopefully find somewhere else. Very simple process to do. You can borrow pictures from other places. There may be other HMOs that you've done in the past that show the sort of standard. What you want to do is to make the advert as close to what you're going to deliver as possible. So try to focus in on the area that you are looking at. Try to get an idea of what price you're going to have to offer it at. Try to get pictures that represent the standard of rooms that you're going to deliver. You might want to put one SpareRoom on there and one with a shared bathroom and see what the different response is like. You can trial so many different variables to see what the demand is like. And equally, as I was saying with the the long-term tracking, where you start to see seasonal trends, if you are in this for the long term, you can post ads at different times of year as well and see what different response rates you get before you actually bite the bullet and commit to anything. So it is a very easy process to do on SpareRoom. You just need to sign up for an account, post a description and some images and contact details, and sit back and wait and see what the responses are like. Like I've said, there is a little bit of a grey area around this. It's not something I'm necessarily recommending or condoning, but if you do want to go down that route, it is an option. A lot of people do it, and it can give you some really useful insights into the demand in your local area. So can be a valuable tool if used in the right way. And if you're getting close to having a property, you could even start to list build a little bit and say to them, sorry, the rooms have been taken, but we do have another property coming available in the next couple of months. Do you want me to make you aware of it when it is available? And you can start to have a pipeline of prospective tenants before you've even bought your property. So that can be useful. And if you're genuinely going down the path, you could say this property isn't available for a few months, so you're not really being dishonest. You are hoping to create something that will be ready in a couple of months, and you can do it however you feel comfortable with it. But the reason I bring it up is because it can give you some really valuable data, and it is worth doing. What I would suggest though is work through them in the order that I've suggested. So start with your basic analysis, then try to figure out exactly how SpareRoom split up your different postcode areas. You can then start to extrapolate that over time to get really valuable data. That is when the value really starts to come. You can look at doing it with your heat maps, and you can also then start to look at using dummy ads as well. There are a whole host of different ways that you can analyze data on Rightmove. All of them give slightly different results. Some are definitely more valuable than others, and it's really down to you to figure out what works for you, what you've got the time to track, and how much value you see in doing this. And what we will talk about in the next video are some of the other ways out with SpareRoom, because that's obviously only one part of it. Some of the other things that you can be doing to track demand for different areas, for different tenant types, and just as an alternative to SpareRoom. So we will see you in that next video.